you. So in the late 80s, there was a movie, too, built on that called They Live, where this hapless drifter comes across this pair of sunglasses, as one does. And they had this unusual quality. When he put them on, he was able to see things as they really were. And it turns out what was going on is that aliens had invaded the Earth. And they were disguising themselves as humans and controlling humans with subliminal messages to keep them docile while they harvested the population. And he could see it because he had the magical sunglasses on. They don't really specify if it was the sunglasses or something else going on with this man. But he was now the only one who was aware of the conspiracy against him. And the plot of the movie gets quite ridiculous from there on, leading up to the iconic quote, I came here to chew bubblegum and I just ran out of bubblegum. So this movie, though it was kind of weirdly receptive when it came out, is a cult classic now, often admired for its unusual exploration of the very idea around conspiracy and paranoia. And the paranoia that drives those conspiracies. The idea is that other people are literally out to destroy you. And though most people accept that in our lives this is not the case, oftentimes some people have that sneaking suspicion in the back of their mind. Well, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get me. And in chapter 6 of Daniel, we find that Daniel is the target of a very real conspiracy against him by those in power. And they will use any means possible to try to destroy him, including weaponizing his own faith against him. So as we come to this chapter, we're going to see two kind of divisions this morning. We're going to see the commitment of the faithful and the conspiracy against them of the enemy. And so we're going to pick up here in verse 1 with the commitment of the faithful. It says, Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, stationed throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel. These satraps would be accountable to them so that the kings would not be defrauded. So, as a way of catching us up, we've moved on from the kingdom of Babylon. As Richard finished off for us last week, the reign of Belshazzar ended suddenly because he was weighed and found wanting. And so another has risen to take his place, a usurper, one from the Persians who had taken over Babylon. And we're introduced to this person at the end of chapter 5 by name only, Darius the Mede. Now, this character of Darius, really, we don't know all that much about. There's actually no historical record of Darius aside from another man named Darius the Great who would not have been there around this point in time. And this has led some to believe that maybe this is in the book of Daniel, a nickname given to this ruler to kind of sum up who he is. And this person who is placed over the Babylonian province by the Persians. It's a placeholder for the person who had that office. And either way, the character of Darius in this story takes the role, the archetype of what all these kings we have seen, even the Babylonian kings in this story up until now. And we find that he is a very different person from Nebuchadnezzar or Belshazzar, or even Jehoiakim, who we saw at the beginning of this book. He's got a very different kind of temperament. He's a very different leadership style. He's a very different spirit than the ones that Daniel has worked with before. However, we see that he still shows Daniel the same favor as his predecessors, because God has preserved Daniel's position through the overthrow of Babylon. And we find him here now in the court of Darius. Likely, Daniel's reputation had preceded him and earned him this position. And so Darius appoints these satraps, which literally means protectors of the realm, to watch over the provinces. And they weren't protectors in the strict sense of the term, but overseers over the affairs of state. And over these 120, there were 3 administrators, one who was Daniel. And so here in verse 3 it says this: Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and the satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit. So the king planned to set him over the whole realm. And much like Joseph before him, Daniel seems to find himself as a stranger in a strange land, in a strange government, in a strange people, in a place of favor and given leadership over others. And the wisdom that God had given him and the care he had for those around him, no matter which kingdom they were from, set him apart from all the others. Daniel's commitment to God, to obedience, kept him blameless. Daniel's commitment got him to a position of safety and influence. Daniel's commitment gave him a position of strength and power. And there's a lesson here for us, just briefly pausing to look at that. What gets somebody there? A lesson for us as pilgrims and strangers in this world. Daniel knew he did not belong to Babylon, yet he was faithful in Babylon. When Persia took over, Daniel knew he did not belong to Persia, but he was faithful in Persia. We live in a world that we live in, but we don't belong to. But we're called to be faithful in that world. We live in a world that has changed a lot, even over the last few years. A world that looks very different from what we remember. Many of you were around for very significant historical events, and you remember a world that looked different from this one. You remember a switchover from Babylon to Persia. Think of the dot-com revolution that changed the world, the accessibility of news networks, cable, cell phones, smartphones, social media, wars, rumors of wars. In the last 40 years alone, our world has totally shifted from one way to being to another way. In the last 10 years, our world has shifted. The political climate's changed, and that's spilled over into the social climate. And then that spilled over into the church community. People act differently, believe differently, behave differently than they did before. No longer do we have neighbors content to disagree but live in harmony, but we have people at each other's throats and over trivial issues who, instead of making fast friends, they become quick enemies. It almost feels like we've seen the fall of Babylon and the rise of Media Persia under a different rulership. So the question is, what do we do? How do we deal with a changing world? Do we change with the world? Do we adopt their attitudes? Do we adapt to submit to their way of doing things? Or do we remain faithful and committed in Persia as well as Babylon? Do we remain faithful to our calling no matter what the world around us looks like, no matter who's in charge? Now, in a world that's trying to tell you what to believe, how to think, and how to behave, like we tell our kids in Sunday school, dare to be a Daniel. Stay committed to living as God's exile in a strange land. You live in Babylon, but you don't belong to it. You live in this world, but you don't belong to it. You belong to another kingdom. But you still live faithfully in this one. That's what Daniel did, and it did not go unnoticed. Here's the effect it had. Here's how his enemies talked about him. You see in verse 4. The administrators and satraps, therefore, kept trying to find a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom. But they could find no charge or corruption, for he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. Then these men said, "We will never find any charge against this Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God." They found out the hard way. The only way they could make a move against Daniel, the only way their conspiracy would work, was if they found a way to use his commitment to faithfulness to God against him. And that leads us to our second observation today, from the commitment of the faithful, being Daniel, to the conspiracy against the faithful. So as we read on, verse 6, it says, "So the administrators and satraps went together to the king and said, 'May King Darius live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors, they've all agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an edict that for 30 days, anyone who petitions any god or man except for you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den. Therefore, your majesty, establish the edict and sign the document, so that as the law of the Medes and the Persians, it is irrevocable and cannot be changed. And King Darius signed the written edict. Now, just because Daniel wasn't paranoid didn't mean they weren't out to get him. It seems like they followed Daniel for a while. They have observed his habits, observed his routines to find a way to foil him. And after some time, we don't know how long, but we do know it was before he was set up as the supreme administrator over the whole realm, they finally found a way. Well, let's just make it illegal to pray. The law of the Medo-Persians was unique in that it was irrevocable. You could not stop it. Everyone was bound to it. The law was absolute, even to the king. Anything that was signed into law was unbreakable, and there were no exceptions given. This law would mean that no matter how favored, how good, how honest, and how trustworthy Daniel was, he would not be exempt from this decree. But how would they get it passed? How would they get this through? Well, they did the smart thing like everybody does. Every time you have people in power, you got the bootlickers down here that they know exactly what buttons to push to get what they want. Play on the king's pride. Don't make it illegal just to pray at all or ask anything at all. Make it so that they just have to ask the king. This would serve two purposes. They knew Daniel would pray no matter what, so he would become subject to the penalty. And second, this would make Daniel seem disloyal to the king, because he had a favored position with Darius, and if it seemed he was defying Darius personally, then any favor he had would be eradicated. It would make him look like a traitor to Darius. So if you think about it, it's really quite a brilliant plan. It's a master course in manipulation. They know Darius enough to know that he would not be able to pass up such a wonderful ego-stroking law. But they also knew that Daniel well enough to know that he would be unable to keep it. And the penalty they came up with was one that was public and theatrical. They wanted to make a point to everyone. If someone gets between those in power and what they want, they will be destroyed by the most violent means necessary. And it's worth pausing here just to think about one thing. It says it'll be thrown into the lion's den or the den of lions, depending on your translation. Now, most of us, we've heard this in Sunday school growing up. We've heard it through church growing up. We know the story. It's very popular. We've just accepted this as a basic fact. But as an adult, don't you wonder why on earth they were keeping lions around? You ever stop to ask that? Like, okay, it's kind of convenient you just have this pit full of lions here. It's a very interesting thing. Well, there's something to be said about, in our world, the black market that exists for exotic animals, exotic cats in particular. Think of Mike Tyson and people like that who collect them. But in ancient times, why would they go to all this effort to keep all these lions in captivity? Why would they have something like that just lying around? No pun intended. Just lying around. Anyway, believe it or not, it was not primarily for executions, nor was it for a zoo. It was actually for sport. The lions were captured and bred as future prey for recreational hunting. And much like today, you can go to certain preserves and pay to hunt a certain animal. It was the same way back then. The Persians had the same practice. This den was accessible from above. There's no access around the side. You go down into it, get one out, and hopefully you didn't die, and then you would take it off to go be hunted. And as we know from stories of people who keep exotic animals and how it often goes wrong is just because these animals were in captivity, they were by no means docile. Because a wild animal is still always going to be a wild animal, no matter what kind of a cage you have it in. So these lions would eat whatever was thrown down there, including a particular lawbreaker. This plot was perfect. It was a sure shot. Daniel would be food for the lions within a matter of days, and their position with the king would be cemented forever. It just might work. You know, there's another lesson here for us from Daniel. Though he doesn't appear in this scene, actually these first 9 verses, you don't see Daniel at all. He's talked about, he's mentioned, he's thought about, he's conspired against, but he's not here. But even his enemies know the kind of man that Daniel is. They know the kind of faithfulness to God that he shows. So here's the lesson for us. Here's the challenge. Here's a thought for us. How were we known even by our enemies? Now let's put all this over here to the side, because I don't think you have somebody trying to throw you in a den of lions. If you do, well, congratulations. But I don't think any of us are in danger of any of those kinds of conspiracies. We're not in danger of someone coming after us just for us being faithful to God. We are very privileged in that sense. Our friends around the world aren't. But if you were absent and we were under those kinds of circumstances, what would be thought of you? If someone was conspiring to get you thrown into a lion's den, what would they have as evidence? Faithfulness to God always stands out, and true faithfulness will always be what people notice first. They may also talk about your values, they may mention your preferences, they may acknowledge your opinions, but your faithfulness to God is what should mark you out from this world. So ask yourself, are you known as a person of prayer? Are you known as a generous servant? Are you known for loving your enemies? I'm making a point here, son. Are you known for treating others as yourself, both in your words and your actions? Let's take it to Jesus' level. Are you known as someone who's poor in spirit, meek, pure in heart, merciful, peacemaking, hungering and thirsting after righteousness? Well, if you're not, you're never going to be known as someone who is persecuted for his name's sake. Is your commitment to Christ enough to condemn you, or are you indistinguishable from Babylon? That's a challenge for us. Because God called Daniel to be a light to those people wherever he was. That was the calling he gave to Israel. He placed them as a light to the nations to show what it was like when you submit to live under God's rule. And they decided, no, we want to be like everybody else. See how that worked out for them. But Daniel kept the covenant in Babylon. He did not say, I will be like the Babylonians, I will be like the Persians. He said, no, I will obey God's purpose to be a light in this nation. Well, then God calls us. What did he call us? Jim knows this one. Salt and light. To do what? To shine his light in dark places, to bring hidden things out, to show the world what it looks like when God is king. The question is, do we? Or are we just like everybody else? Are we more like Darius, easily moved and influenced by the attitudes of other people who tell us what we want to hear, to get us to do what they want us to do? Are we shaping ourselves more like the avarice and greed that consume our culture? Are we being conformed, or are we being transformed? That is a question only you can answer. And it is one that you will. You can answer it in this life, or you can answer it at the judgment. You will answer that question. So, Christ Church, what are we going to be known for? People know, by the way, we bought the building up the street. Richard keeps talking to people, tell them, they're like, oh yeah, we know. It's like, how does everybody know before we say anything? I don't know.
We're in Mobile.
Yeah, that's true, Mobile. You know, telephone, telegram, tell one person. They know we bought that. There's been talk about it. Some are curious, some are indifferent, some are just thankful it's not going to be a Chick-fil-A. There's lots of opinions about it. But do you just want to be known as the church that bought the building up the street? Or do you want to be known as something else? How will you be shaped? How will we go forward? Darius or Daniel? We can follow the world systems and try to build a money-making machine church. We can follow all the corporate patterns and get butts into seats and hope that pays the bills and that's all we do. Or are we going to be faithful in Babylon and do something different? Are we going to maybe get back to what we're supposed to be doing? To do what Jesus called us to do? You remember Bishop Williams' sermon? To bring that gospel to those people? Amen. The answer to that is up to us. It's a challenge that only we can respond to. We have a mission statement, right? You should have it memorized by now. Worshiping, healing, missionary community where Jesus Christ transforms lives. If you don't have it memorized, I can get you a discount tattoo of it, put it right on your arm, and just look at it every time you forget. But that starts here with us. And if we don't make the choice now, before we get there, forget it. It won't happen. We might as well change our mission statement to, we will be like everybody else. It starts with us, here, individually, before corporately. Who are you? What are you known for? If we want to have an influence in the life of this city, if we want to impact our community to the point where only our name needs to be mentioned for people to know what we're about, to know what we do, to know who goes there, we will have to walk a different path. We're going to have to be committed. If we want God to use us like He wants to use us, we have to learn how to be faithful wherever we are, no matter what, without influence from the outside, even in Babylon. Amen. Please grab. So the first and principal announcement of Christ Anglican Church of Mobile is, Jesus is Lord. Well, you sound like you believe it mostly. So. Not much, just to say that we had Sunday school start again this week. It's in the building next door. That's why we had a sign there that said Adult Sunday School. That's where it is. So if you show, and some of you showed up at a great time, so thanks. It's great to have you getting all back together. See, we're finally all getting our feet up under us and figuring this thing out. So it was great to do that. Our next order of business is going to be life groups. We are working on that. Mark and Gail's group never stopped. Richard and I guess Libby would be the co-leader now. Their group has restarted this last week, meeting every other week. We're hoping to get another group launched here pretty quick, probably toward the end of the holidays. And if you're interested in hosting a group or beginning a group to get together, let us know. You don't have to do it every week. You don't have to be solely responsible for all of it. If you just want to help in some way, many hands make light work. So life groups are an important part because it's a way for us to get together in a less structured setting and kind of get to know each other a little better, to become friends, to brothers and sisters in Jesus, to do like what the early church did. You remember when we went through Acts, they would go in the temple and the synagogue, but also they would meet in homes. And so it's a great way for us to share that life together in these groups that we have. So that, and there's one more thing, just a quick something I want to let you guys know about. We all are aware, thanks to the proliferation of news coverage, that our local food banks here and around the country are about to be severely overwhelmed by the tug of war that's going on up there at the top. And again, this is nothing to say about policy. It's got nothing to say about this side, that side, who all these people are over here, none of that. This has nothing to do with them because, frankly, I don't care what they have to say because they don't know this community. You know this community, and you know who else does? Jesus does. And He's the one who, didn't He say, when I was without clothes, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And when I was hungry, you fed me. And doesn't He say, oh, actually, wait, no, that wasn't me. That was the least of these. So we have an opportunity here, and I've been working with Elizabeth and Richard and a few other people to kind of try to figure out what to do. Food banks are very difficult. There's a lot of red tape, but there are ways around that if you work with dry goods. So what we're doing now, Richard has spoken to the people at Greer's. I'm trying to work with the people at Piggly Wiggly and Costco to see if we can't get some non-perishables to put together just quick meal kits for families and individuals who are on the poor side of things, who cannot, I mean, for God's sakes, the last 6 years, all of us feel the pinch. Even if you make good money, you know it's more expensive. Now imagine if you're on a fixed income. Imagine if you have 6 kids to feed. It's hard. And so we can't do a lot, but we can do something. And so keep your eyes open, because we'll be sending some information out to you. I mean, this is just the first week, so there's a little bit of lead time, and it looks like they might be getting their act together, and I hope they do. I hope that they're able to figure something out up top. But the thing is, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the people here that we know, because those people aren't going to take care of us. It's communities that we're going to take care of each other. That's what's going to be the answer to these problems that we're facing. So, what we need is help. If you want to donate towards some supplies, that'd be great. Absolutely great. But let's not just write off our service, because as much as we need funds, we also need these. And again, I'm going to have more information for you soon on that. This is a project we're working on. Any help is help that we would gladly take. So, that's all I have on that, and you'll be getting an email this week regarding more information with this, and I'm going to hand it off to our reader of the day to read the scriptures.